education is different in Hawaii. We're the only state that public education is a state responsibility, not a single penny from property taxes or the counties fund the public schools. So, Patsy Mink was very much concerned. The great thing about our school system is equity of funding. We had a process called geographic exceptions that if you could request to be in another school outside of your district, and essentially they agreed to open that wide open so that as long as there's space, that a parent could send their child to any public school. And if there's a limitation, if they have more applicants than they have spaces, then it would be a lottery system. So it wouldn't be, selection of who gets into the best performing schools. It was every resident had an equal chance to be in any school that they wanted to.
Taguchi, we changed the budget around, the structure, we gave more flexibility, and so we traded autonomy for accountability, right? And we talked about the 5 R's, roles, responsibilities, restructuring, reform, and resources, and how do they fit together? And we had these conversations. And
it was really 2 years, 93 and 94 was really intensive restructuring of the whole system. And we heard from many, many parents and teachers and principals that, it's so hard to make any change. Schools were talking about trying to lengthen the school day or going to 4-day instructionals and 1 day for other. I mean, there was a lot of interest, and all they heard was no, 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 no.
Yep.
So the whole notion between student-centered schools was that we wanted to give charters the ultimate waiver, the waiver from everything, so that they had the freedom to implement any change that they wanted to, and they didn't have to ask for permission. The previous system was you had to ask for permission, and they would ask for permission, and they would get no answer back for months and months and months and months. Right. And maybe at some point someone would say no. Most of the time they're just sitting waiting.
We already have a constitution that says it's public schools, right? These are public schools. We're just changing the governance system so that we can empower schools to improve student learning. And so we kept going on that mantra. But in the journey, I remember this very well, where the Board of Education, which was elected at the time, sent out this flyer to all the students, to the teachers. 180,000 students got this to stop Ige and McCartney's bill and kill it. So in that bill, we also have charter schools or student-centered schools giving another alternative. And so we were helping to create the new framework from going from that factory-based model to a more innovative model to get ready for the digital age. And keep the good things about the statewide system, but how do you improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the current system and help build it, because it's the transition management.
The bill itself, I believe, allowed a process for both. That you could be a conversion school, as you know, and Mike, we had been meeting with Waialae and Lanikai elementary schools, and they were frustrated and they wanted freedom from the system, and they were tired of requesting waivers and having to wait, and they felt that they were stifled. We believe that public money should only go to public schools, and in order to be a public school and receive public money, then you need to play by the rules, which means you take all students. You can't select students. You have to take anyone who wants to go there. And if you have more applicants than you have spaces, then there should be a fair process, not a selective process of a school deciding who they want and who they don't want. And I think as we talked about that, then the whole notion of vouchers went away because none of the private providers or none of the others who wanted state money were willing to become public schools.
Yeah.
They weren't willing to give up the selection of students they want in versus, taking any public.
We have a constitutional amendment, right, Governor, that also says you got to use the money for public schools, not private. It's in the state constitution for education. And so there was talk about putting that on the ballot, but this provided a different path because we have limited resources. And what about the schools that maybe need help? We're going to punish them so we don't improve the environment there because the money was. So it was how to find the balance so that we can move forward together as a state, not just only this group of people or that group of people.
Why is it, because this is very different, that all of the funding for the charter school is managed, or so much of it is managed by the authorizer, the commission? That is not usual in other states.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it was about accountability and making sure that there would be someone who is making sure as public funds that they are being spent appropriately, and as I said, the department didn't want to be involved with any of that. And so our law does give it to the authorizer. We believe that part of that accountability is to have responsibility for accounting for the funds. And that really did give them a way to encourage compliance, right? I mean, if the funding went to them and they weren't performing or their students weren't achieving, then at least there was some mechanism that they could put them on probation or ask them to come up with a restructuring plan or to do something different if they weren't achieving.